bring you a little bit different of a video than a review or some gameplay of Flight Sim. What I want to talk about today is how to build a system to get the best performance out of Flight Sim, at least in my opinion. There are a lot of videos on how to build a gaming system and what you need for those, but none really tailored to how to build a computer for Flight Sim. There's a lot of information on the internet, and I understand that it's hard, especially for a newcomer or for someone who's not that experienced with computers yet, to build a system and figure out what they need. Trust me, I've been there, so I just want to provide the little bit of advice that I've gained over, or not advice, but knowledge I've gained over 20 years of being in the Flight Sim community, and about 10 years of building my own systems. So the most important thing in any Microsoft ESP based Flight Sim, which would be Flight Sim World, Flight Simulator X, any of the prepared 3D versions, is single core CPU performance, which is why Intel CPU performs better in Flight Sim than AMD CPU performs, because Intels are faster on a single core basis, where AMDs are usually faster on a multi-core. I know there's a lot of hype from Lockheed and Laminar and Flight Sim World saying, or Dovetail, sorry, saying that, oh, we've switched stuff from the CPU to the GPU. The GPU, isn't as important as it used to be. That may very well be true, but the GPU is still the main limiting factor, or the CPU is still the main limiting factor in smooth performance in Flight Sim. Adding more cores isn't going to make it any better. It'll just make your textures load in quicker, which isn't such an issue with prepared 3D, because Lockheed has really worked hard to change the code around and make it a lot more efficient in loading the textures in and preventing blurries that we used to get back in the FSX days. So I do recommend getting the best CPU you can afford, and I do recommend getting an Intel CPU. If you can afford it, I do recommend like a 7700K. For right now though, if you're watching this and you haven't built a system, I would wait a couple months, because Intel is going to be releasing the i7-8700K, which is going to give about an 11% performance jump over the 7700K in single core performance. That doesn't sound like much, but if you're coming from an older system like a 3077K or 3770K, or like me from a 4790K, you're getting not only the 11% jump from the 7700K, but you're also getting whatever percentage jump from your CPU to the 7700K. So it's a worthwhile upgrade for me. I'm just gonna do like I did when I built my Intel system, after my AMD system, and just reuse literally every part that I can. So the water coolers, everything like that, I'll just reuse. The only thing I'll be changing out, just because I'm going from DDR3 to DDR4 with the new CPUs, would be my RAM, my motherboard, and my CPU. But back to, which is a great way to upgrade your system, but not spend a ton of money doing it. But going back to what I was talking about with the CPU performance, the evidence to me that shows that we're still very CPU limited and single core performance limited is that when I switched from a AMD system to an Intel system, I gained a very significant amount of FPS, around 20 on average, 20 FPS on average, which is a pretty huge jump, considering that both CPUs were clocked at the exact same clock speed. So, and I used literally the same parts over again. Same RAM, same video card. The only thing I changed was the motherboard and the CPU. Even used the same cooler over again when I went from AMD to Intel. and I actually copied my CFG over and used it because it's, with the Intel, it's an 8 thread, and the AMD was an 8 core CPU. So I picked up a huge amount of FPS just by switching brands of CPU, and that's because Intel's performs so much better in single core. The other thing I want to touch on is graphics cards. For Flight Sim, you don't need the best graphics card out there. Currently, I run a GTX 1080, but that's mainly because I do a lot of other gaming too that requires that sort of performance, GTA, Battlefield series stuff. But for Flight Sim, I would definitely recommend getting the latest generation, but you don't have to go out and spend $800 on a graphics card like I did, because you're not really going to see any benefit in Flight Sim. Um, Moving from the GTX 770 to the GTX 980, I saw no difference in performance that was, measurable, maybe an FPS or two. Going from the 980 to 980 Ti, really nothing, and going from the 980 Ti to the 1080, really nothing. And the only thing I gained would be, video or GPU RAM, which did help with stutters a little bit, just because the textures could load in, and I wasn't limited on the amount of VRAM that I had. So if you're building a system and you're trying to figure out, where you should put your money, I would definitely say put your money into a good quality motherboard and an Intel CPU. That's one of the better, at least an i5 or an i7, the newest architecture you can get. For motherboards, I would recommend any good brand name, Asus, MSI, ASRock, anything that's kind of a big name. I would recommend, and I would recommend not skimping on a motherboard. The minimum I would really consider spending on a motherboard is about 150. The most I would consider spending is probably about 250 to 260. Just because below that you're in questionable quality, and above that you're paying for very minute improvements in quality. But with a higher quality motherboard, what you're gaining is more flexibility. You are also gaining, higher quality components so that they can supply voltage more evenly and safely and smoothly to your CPU if you do overclock. So it makes your overclock more stable. With my MSI motherboard, I've had my 4790K at 4.5 gigahertz solid. I don't have it throttled to where it actually ever slows down. I've been running it like that for 3 years, and it hasn't failed me yet. So a good motherboard is essential for overclocking. And to do overclocking, you're going to need a K-series processor. So if you've ever wondered what the K meant, the difference between a 7700K or a 7700, the K means that it's unlocked and that you can overclock the CPU. I definitely recommend spending a little bit extra money to get the K-series processors, just because you can gain so much performance by overclocking the system. When you're overclocking, I definitely would say turn off the turbo. Turbo is great, but it can lead to stutters because the CPU ramps up performance, then drops it back down when it thinks it does need it, and it's kind of playing a game of catch up. When it comes to hard drives, just kind of choose whatever fits into your budget the best. SSDs are nice, but they aren't really that important for Flight Sim. You may get a little bit better texture load time, but not really that much noticeable if you have a good CPU. For my system, I have a dedicated SSD for system boot. I would recommend getting that just because the system boots up so much faster on SSD, and it's very snappy and responsive. I can be from pressing the button on my computer, power it on, to be fully booted into Windows, ready to go within 10 to 15 seconds with an SSD, where it was actually about a minute to a minute and a half with a traditional hard drive. I do have both X-Plane and Prepared 3D on their each have their own dedicated 512 gigabyte SSD, but that was just more because I wanted to try it, and I'm very into very small gains. Whatever gain I can get is worthwhile to me. You're not going to see a gain in FPS, but texture load times and just generally loading into the sim is faster on an SSD, but not so substantially that you know if you have to choose between getting an SSD or a better CPU. I would still get the better CPU. It's going to give you the most return on your investment. Cooling wise, a factory cooler is not going to be good enough for overclocking. Personally, I recommend a liquid cooler, just because it gives you a little bit more flexibility, and I think it's not as dependent on ambient air temperature in the room. But with that said, there are some great air coolers out there. Just don't skimp on a cooler or think that you'll be able to get away using a cheap CPU cooler. Get something worthwhile and good. The minimum I would ever consider is like the Hyper 212, like that's shown here. That's a good cooler for actually a pretty low price. But like I said, I would recommend going water. It looks nice, and it makes things simpler. At least when you overclock, because it gives you a little bit more overhead in the control of your temperatures. One thing that we are moving away from, and anyone who's kind of followed computer progress for the past few years, is we're moving away from even having CD drives. On my most recent build, I don't have a CD drive. It's pointless. Just in case I need to boot a CD onto it, I bought a little plug-in USB one if I really need it. But to be honest with you, I've had that little plug-in one for a year and a half. I've never used it. Yeah, I just took it out of the box and set it with some stuff next to the computer. So, if you are one of the people who are afraid to build your own system, first off, there are a lot of videos on YouTube that will really teach you how to put the system together. It's like putting Legos together. It's very simple. It's not hard. The harder part, I guess, is picking components, and that is kind of a steep learning curve. Trying to figure out what goes with what, and which CPU socket is which, and all that. A lot of that can be found out from just reading really quickly. So, like, look right here. This is a socket LGA 1151. The motherboard usually says it in the thing, so those are compatible. Really, honestly, I would recommend building your own system, just because it's kind of like working on your own car. It's easier to tell if there's something wrong with it if you know what's going on, under the hood, and also you're not relying on somebody else to fix it for you. You can just go and say, okay, well, this failed. I'm gonna go ahead and order the part. My system will back up in however long it takes the part to get here, not whenever the computer repair guy feels like it, and after I pay him an exorbitant sum of money. But for those of you who still don't feel comfortable with building a computer, I would recommend literally getting kind of a bare bones system. Maybe where you get a really good CPU, and let that be your starting point. GPU upgrade super easy to accomplish. And when you do buy a system or build a system, plan ahead. don't get the smallest power supply because it's the cheapest. With my system, I have a 1200 watt power supply, not because I need it, but because it makes that portion of my computer future proof. You know, if I get a bigger graphics card, I add more hard drives, fans, the CPU suddenly start needing a huge amount of energy, whatever, I'm future proof. And that's what you really need to do when you build a system. You know, you pick a good case, you pick good fans, you pick good power supply, and you future proof yourself with those components so that it makes the switch to the next upgrade a lot cheaper. Um, I don't think I've missed anything that's really critical, except for RAM. I forgot to talk about RAM. With Flight Sim, you don't need to have the fastest RAM, or really any gaming in general. You don't need to have the fastest RAM. It's not going to be a huge boost, you know, getting 4000 megahertz RAM versus like 2500 megahertz RAM. It's just not that important. With Flight Sim moving to a 64-bit platform, you're better off to get more RAM than you are to get faster RAM. I mean, if you're stepping into one of the newer systems that uses DDR4, obviously, you know, you don't want to get, you know, super cheap RAM. I would recommend G-Skill. It's a great product. They've been reliable. In every system I've built, I've used G-Skill RAM because they're price-wise they're great, reliability they're great, and performance they're great. I've built probably 10 systems using G-Skill, not just gaming systems, but systems for friends and family also. Um, the most important thing to look for in your RAM, to me, is not even its speed, but its latency. Um, for performance, you know, speed's great, but your latency timings are very important as well. So try to get the lowest latency timing you can. As you step up in RAM, step up in speed, you're not going to be able to get, you know, if you're at 3600 megahertz RAM, you're not going to be able to get, you know, RAM that has a CAS latency of 9. You're going to probably be around 12 or 13. But still, you want to try to get the lowest latency you can. Alright, if anybody watching has any questions, please post some comments below. I'll be more than happy to answer them. I know I probably missed some stuff, but I really just kind of wanted to cover the big, important stuff. And if you take anything away from this video, take this away. The CPU is still the most important thing in Flight Sim when it comes to performance. So don't skimp on your CPU. You can skimp on pretty much everything else, especially like the graphics card, like I said. I mean, no, you don't want to go get, you know, a GTX 280 or, you know, potato for a graphics card, but, you know, a 950 Ti or a 1050 would definitely be enough for Flight Sim as it is sits now. Alright folks, well I hope this has been a help to some people, and so get out there and enjoy Flight Sim, build a new system, have a good day.